So another requirement having to do with web apps for this exam has to do with Enable Diagnostics logging. Now we can see right off the top, the first thing on the web app overview is a link to how to diagnose and solve problems. Now ultimately, this is a link to basically documentation and stuff like that. What you want to do is go down all the way to almost to the bottom of the settings. There is a monitoring section. And in here, we can set alerts. So if you want to be notified when your application's having particular issues with high CPU, there's also the ability to run metrics. So you can basically graph CPU usage over a period or data usage, HTTP errors. We can see if there were any 404 errors thrown by the app, etc. We can make these charts and basically pin them to the dashboard, or we can even create an alert based off of one of these items. But it's important to know your application runs just like any application in IIS. That is, it can create log files. So right now, by default, I turned off all logging, and there's no logging going on for this app. Now, not that we've deployed any code to it yet, except for the web job. But you can see here, it's not saving any log files, right? So I might want to start off by turning on application logs. Now, application logs require a storage account. In this instance, I can obviously have it stored to the local file system of the web app as well, or I can have an external storage account. I'll have to configure that. So I'll create a new storage account really quick here. So I'm going to call this app logs. Oh, it's oops. Well, I did that. So it's a fully qualified name, .core.windows.net. Call it app logs. V1, standard performance, locally redundant storage. There's nothing, we don't need to have this being globally available, etc. So click OK. And when that's ready, then we'll be able to turn on application logging for this web app. So the storage account got created. I get to select it. I do have to create a container, and this is for web app logs. Private access level, makes sense. So I'm going to select that container. And now when I save this, my web app will start spitting out its application errors into a storage account. I can also choose the number of days to store, so it can become a rolling system. Now we also have other types of error messages: failed request tracking, detailed error messages, web server logging, etc. So more than just the app logging, we can do it like IIS logs essentially. So if I go into the same storage account, I can create called it web logs. Select. So when I click save now, I have to pick the retention period for the web logs as well. Very enough. So now I'm storing the logs that the application would throw. So any kind of events, errors, exceptions that were not handled, and IS itself, how it would have logs. So all of the, even if an image is retrieved, and all of the HTTP requests get stored in here. Okay. Now we would have these things in a diagnostics log. So how do we then view these logs, right? So now we start collecting the logs, but how do we view them? Well, first of all, the logs are being stored in a storage account, and so in a blob, and you can basically access the contents of that blob container at any time. So for instance, if we were to go to my all resources here, and I was to look for storage accounts, we created the app log storage account. We saw there's blob table. I'm going to minimize this. I can go into web logs, and I can see that just like we would expect with something like IIS, the web logs are broken into the name of the app, the year, the month, the date, the time, and there is a small log file that's been created. Okay, so if we wanted to download this, we can download this to our local, and we would have access to the contents of this log file. The other thing that we can do is go into the web app, and there is a real-time log stream. So if we're in the process of testing, then we'll be able to see real-time interactions with our website within the stream. Now, the application logs that they're talking about here are not the storage account ones. They are, in fact, the file system ones. So we can see with this hover, it says you'll need to turn this on to enable the streaming log feature. The setting turns itself off after 12 hours. So this is a temporary storage for logs, and then you can basically use the streaming feature with this application log setting. So we'll give that a second for the application to kick in. But if we go back to streaming logs, we can now see a console start up, and we're now connected to the log streaming service.